A colleague once asked me, why am I repeatedly reading John Locke's essay on human understanding? About 2 years ago, I had mentioned to him that I was experimenting with a kind of atomic habit, James Clear, chaining habits. Now, what habits do you already have that you want to replace or chain other desired good habits to? So I reasoned that out of biological necessity, I of course spend various moments on the toilet every day. So during these sessions, I could read a page or two of John Locke's essay. And I wanted, of course, to go more in depth in the study of a single philosopher, especially a philosopher who wrote in the English language, which is my native language. Typically, in contrast, I've read philosophers that have written in other languages, such as German, Greek, or Latin, and mainly in translation. Although I talk a lot about language learning in this channel, and I've written some software to perhaps hyper accelerate that kind of learning. Ooh, hacking. Now, in spite of this tendency, I usually don't read philosophical works in their original. Sometimes I do that, but after some initial experience in English. That was the case with Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and I even say Nietzsche, not Nietzsche, in the German style of pronunciation. So anyway, he was expecting me to be able to summarize this book. After all, I've read it, 4 or 5 times. But for some reason, whether I was annoyed or even intimidated by his direct style of questioning, I couldn't really come up with a coherent summary when he asked the question to me point blank, in spite of the high number of reps that I had in this exercise, reading John Locke's essay on human understanding. Now, why is that? If this were, for example, history, the history of the Civil War in the United States of America, I'd probably be able to tell you a lot about the battles of Ulysses S. Grant, Robert E. Lee, and so on, and the course of the war, the turning of the tide at Vicksburg and Gettysburg, and so on. The kind of story with its with its rising and falling action, as historians and various historians tend to do, whether in biographies or in general war histories. And you've kind of put them together through multiple sources. With philosophy, I don't really have that sense of a story or coherence, which might be a fundamental limitation. It might beg the question: why do you even like philosophy? What are you even trying to accomplish? Aren't you just a naive tribal person who would want to be a raving prophet and merely want to rile the masses towards a revolution in the name of whatever ideology, so that you can take power and reap all of its benefits? Maybe. But I think that these days you face the argument that in the capitalist system, with its classes and, in principle, limitless money, which is a shadow of power, not untrue power, but it's a shadow of power, in many ways you can kind of do what you want or what you would do if in more primitive times you achieved kingship or even dictatorship. These are the kind of naive childhood dreams that we kind of sublimate, or we lessen them, we decrease them to accommodate ourselves to, I guess, the capitalist system. Not praising communism as better, as though we need greater egalitarianism, but capitalism as a kind of disappointment, as a kind of necessity, because we can't achieve an aristocratic order. We're just total chaos and anarchy and a survival of the strong. even though we're not the guys in the ring or in the octagon fighting it out and exchanging blood for blood and so on and getting up after apparent knockouts. Probably not. So, anyway, yeah. So I didn't have a summary, and maybe I didn't really care about attaining a summary. I think in this exercise, and you could try this exercise too. You could see whether you could summarize it or not. But if the text is right there, and it also exists in digital form, and we know we have access to artificial intelligence besides Wikipedia articles that summarize this for us, and also tell us what are the typical disputes in the vast secondary literature on this, that achieving a summary for its own sake is it's kind of futile. Now, if I achieved a summary in contrast because it facilitated my completion of some definite project, whether I'm building something in technology or proposing some kind of invention, then the summary has some kind of advantage. If an analogy would be appropriate, I would want a map or a simplification of the routes or what are the wind streams in this ocean if I'm sailing to an island where I expect to find buried treasure, for example, some kind of reward or incentive. Now, what I think I desired to achieve is a making regular of my response to disparate but similar phenomena throughout the essay. I wanted to take my growing theories of interpretation out for a test drive. Often I've talked about interrogative criticism or also numerical criticism. And interrogative criticism, just to remind you, largely has to do with the assessment of which terms fit into which interrogative categories, and also a discernment of the implicit relative values, not only of the terms, but of entire interrogative categories, such as where and what. And you'll notice, for example, that certain languages prefer not only location, but total location. Germanic languages tend to say blah, 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 blah. Therefore, I do X, Y, and Z. So elements of location tend to serve as pronouns or references to entire clauses, which just indicates the language is whereful. The mind so constituted has a preference, prefers, prioritizes, assigns more weight, value, points, coins to interrogative category where. Is that good or is that bad? It's an historical trend. You may want to avoid it if you wish to achieve superior results to the mind or minds that have so thought historically. Whereas classical languages, Latin for example, would say quam ob rem, or because of this thing or on this thing, which I'm lacking a good example, but if you'll trust me, then it tends toward the interrogative category of what and not where. And this is just a thesis. There's a few intermediate ideas missing as I speak this through. You could say the same with the conjunction quod, and perhaps quam ad modum or ad quam modum, which means how, and literally to which mode. So we don't just say how. We don't speak in terms of the question. In this case, we refer to a term in the category how, which is a mode. Or another example of a term in the category how is a strategy. that wasn't very conclusive now, was it? But so let's get back to John Locke. And I think the idea was preparation for another kind of work. Rather than try to condense my own notes assembled over the course of a year accidentally, like weeds growing in a poorly cultivated garden, trying to cultivate that field into some kind of order, and maybe some new wild fruits are to be found among these weeds, which are nutritious. Analogy, perhaps. But perhaps anyway, it would be a more useful exercise to do some kind of commentary on John Locke. Now, why restrict oneself to a mere commentary? Well, I guess one reason is SEO. If I were actually trying to grow a channel or write a blog, then it might help to talk about John Locke, an essay on human understanding. And is the intent to finally discern what Locke really meant in all those cryptic, mysterious passages. I think he lays out most of what he says in plain English, going back to the fact that it's written in English. And anyway, no, as I said, I want to take my own style of interpretation out for a test drive. That is, formalize it into something that could even become a procedure, a ritual with a certain number of rules and steps, and perhaps something that could be, reduced to a protocol or even an algorithm. Whether it's a program or just a practice, I think it's a secondary matter. But perhaps philosophy, or the act of formal thinking, becomes easier if we have a procedure to follow. So we don't have to reinvent not the wheel, but the recipe for the wheel every time we go about thinking of how to transport ourselves.